All right, let's dive into a book with a title that really makes you stop and think, one that asks a pretty tough question. India, a civilization without care.
The whole book, and really what we're going to break down today, it all hangs on this one single, deeply uncomfortable question. It's a question the author argues India often tries to avoid looking at directly.
So right off the bat, the author sets up this huge contrast. On the one hand, you've got the surface of India. It's busy, it's loud, it's confident, full of energy and economic growth. But the book argues, if you listen closely, beneath all that noise, there's this other feeling, a disturbing sense that suffering has just become normal, that chaos is just accepted, and that ultimately life can feel pretty expendable.
Okay, so that's a pretty provocative claim, right? How does the author even begin to support it? Well, let's get into the core of the inquiry.
The book says this isn't some vague feeling. The evidence is kind of everywhere. You see it when routine deaths become just another statistic in the news, not a tragedy. You see it when a disaster happens and there's this huge wave of public outrage that just fades away without any real, lasting change. The same accidents happen over and over. And maybe the most powerful point, entire generations just learn to adjust to it all, instead of demanding that things get fixed.
Now, it'd be really easy to just blame a certain political party, or maybe a specific economic policy. But the author argues that the usual explanations, they don't quite get to the heart of the matter. The argument here is that the deepest fracture isn't in the halls of Parliament or on the stock market. It's something more fundamental. It's civic and it's psychological. It's about the shared habits and mindsets that make up the society itself.
And looking at it through that lens helps us ask these different kinds of questions, the ones that a purely political or economic analysis might miss. Like, why are basic rules just ignored every single day? Why is public space so often treated like a garbage can? Why does safety seem like something you can negotiate? And why does it feel like basic human dignity is conditional? These are the real issues the author wants to dig into.
This all leads to the book's central diagnosis, what it calls a crisis of care. And this isn't just about a lack of empathy. It's a systemic thing, a widespread lack of care for everything. For life itself, for people's time, for public spaces, for the very institutions that are supposed to protect us, and, ultimately for one another as fellow citizens.
So, if that's the diagnosis, what's the root cause? Where did this come from? This next part of the argument is really the core thesis of the whole book.
Okay, to understand the argument, you got to see this key distinction the author makes. In, let's say, a traditional society, life is regulated by your local community, by your reputation. But modern societies, they just can't work that way. They have to rely on impersonal systems, on rules that are enforced predictably for everyone, and on shared norms that let total strangers cooperate.
And here it is, the central claim of the book. India tried to make this colossal leap from that traditional framework straight into a modern one, but the transition never fully completed. It's kind of stuck in the middle.
So what are the consequences of being stuck in that halfway point? Well, you get a society that has all the democratic rights, but a really weak sense of civic duty. You get these intense, emotional identities tied to your immediate community, but the formal, public institutions are fragile. And you see people who are intensely involved in their social circles, but have a pretty shallow sense of responsibility for the wider public good.
Now, I know, this diagnosis can sound incredibly harsh, but the author is very clear that the point of all this is not to humiliate, it's to learn. The focus is really on the path to repair.
And this quote is absolutely key to understanding the book's whole vibe. Comparison is not self-hate, it is self-respect expressed through seriousness. In other words, looking honestly at how other societies might have solved similar problems isn't an act of betrayal, it's an act of taking your own society seriously enough to want to fix what's broken. So the book's aim is really specific. It wants to challenge those easy, comfortable stories people tell themselves. It wants to question the dysfunction that's become so normal, people don't even see it anymore. It argues that all the small, everyday disciplines matter so much more than grand political slogans. And in the end, it's offering a path to repair what's there, not some fantasy of completely reinventing everything from scratch.
And all of this brings us to the book's final, crucial point, which frames this entire issue as a fundamental choice that has to be made.
Here's the stark warning that the book leaves us with. Civilizations don't usually collapse in some big dramatic fireball. They decay, quietly, bit by bit, when dysfunction becomes routine and when suffering just becomes background noise. And so the book leaves all of us with this final,
incredibly powerful question. It pushes past all the politics and grand theories and asks something much more personal, much more urgent. Can a civilization that has become an absolute expert at enduring pain learn once again how to truly care?